Okay, all right. Looks like I got everybody on. So hopefully you have been finding these teachings beneficial, and those of you that have been engaging in the daily practice meaningful. I wanted to check in first just to see how everybody's doing with that, and see if anyone would like to share anything that they've experienced with this focus on right speech or noble speech. Any successes, any insights, any challenges around the ability to be aware of our speech, what's healthy and meaningful, what's productive, versus lying, divisive speech, harsh speech, or just a lot of mindless speech. I'll check in, and if you want to raise your hand, I'll keep an eye on it, and I can see who may want to share, or if anyone had a question about the practice this week. Okay, not a ton of hands. So if you, oh, there we go. We've got one here. All right, so Michelle, I believe you are up, and let's see if we can hear you.
Hey, John.
Hi.
I did put one question through in like the chat forum, so maybe I posed it in the wrong place.
Oh, I see it. Yeah, I didn't have that up yet, but it's great to hear from you. So do you want to share it out loud, or you want me to just read the chat?
Maybe you can make sense of it more than I can. I don't know.
Okay, let me see. All right, so if our brain is our computer and in charge of functions, our mind is observer. What wanders when our mind wanders? Our awareness. Okay. So here we have, from a Buddhist perspective, our mind is, not necessarily in charge. It processes, right? And our mind is much more than our brain. Our brain is chemicals, electricity. It's an organ. It functions. Mind is boundless, and so our attention is a function of the mind, right? And here people get into a lot of debate around, are we is is the brain controlling things, or does the mind just a function of the brain? Buddhist perspective is we have mind, and mind gives rise to all this, and the brain is correlated. So our mind, we can bring a thought to mind, right? We can consciously observe something. We can be aware of something. Brain processes, and it's part of the biological makeup of our experience. But in Buddhism, and we're going to go into great detail about this really next week, around a continuum of consciousness, and when the body goes, and the consciousness that continues. So the mind then can observe thoughts. The mind can wander. And so we have a level. There's levels of mind. And there's this gross level, this conceptual mind, a thinking mind, a mind that we are used to, that we experience all the time. And there's a more subtle consciousness that's even aware of that. So I can be aware of my thoughts. I can be aware of when my attention wanders or doesn't wander. And so all of that attention would be in the realm of the mind, observing the awareness itself. But the sort of images, the domain of the mind, images, thoughts, worries, concerns, all that, again, is we would say a function of the mind. And the brain itself is just processing, computing, and part of this organ of this human body. But I can think something consciously and it'll light up something in the brain. So to try to make more sense of that is our attention is what's wandering. Awareness, technically, awareness is pretty still. Awareness is just awareness. So there's a very stillness to awareness. But once we become aware of something, then the mind grabs it. and then our attention goes to things. And so it's really this conceptual mind and attention that's wandering. Awareness itself is this very still place. It's just aware. And it's aware before, we start labeling and identifying and conceptualizing. So really what's wandering is our attention.
Okay, that's helpful. So now I have a follow-up question. If the mind is like our attention, and then there's maybe a more subtle aspect that is the awareness, are those two levels associated with one another in some location in the body in Tibetan Buddhism, or that awareness is just throughout and without any designation?
Right. Yeah, you're not going to find location. Yeah. For example, the mind is just, boundless. The mind, like right now, I can be in my living room in my mind. I can travel to India in my mind, the space of the mind. So there's not a locale. As a matter of fact, that's part of one of the practices. Where do you identify it or locate the mind? And it's going to be pretty hard to locate. You can locate a brain pretty easily, but not the mind. The mind.
So in some traditions, there's like the consciousness is thought to be in the heart or something like that. But in this case, there's not like that.
No, the mind is beyond this body. Like even this body will die, but your consciousness continues. However, the consciousness in this human form, in this particular form, at the time of death, and again, there's a whole thing in this book next week, so I don't want to elaborate too much on that. All of that consciousness condenses to like this spot in the heart, the indestructible drop. And it's in that center where it all goes just before, this sort of transition. So it will all go there, and heart and mind, have that connection. So it will condense there, that consciousness.
Okay, so that's like what we practice in sadhana and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, thanks. That was super helpful. That brought in lots of questions from all over the place into one concise answer. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot for opening that door.
Good luck closing it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay. So, let me put that hand down. And so we have another chat. How about idle chatter, like talking about the weather? Is that type of idle chatter to be discouraged? Sometimes the speech can be a point of common ground and even unification. Right. So this is if my motivation is to find common ground, have someone feel comfortable, connect with another human being, well, that motivation, therefore, is mindful talk. It's not idle chatter. So it's not the content of the talk. As a matter of fact, as we unpack karma, and karma is our topic today, our motivation is going to be the single most determinant factor. So is my speech, it's not the content of the speech as much as my motivation. So something that's mindless chatter is going on about a lot of different things with no meaning or purpose to that conversation. So yeah, talking about the weather, as a matter of fact, it's a very common point of easy connection that we see. Some, hey, beautiful day, isn't it? and you're walking by someone, there's a point of connection. This acknowledgement has a purpose, so it can be quite meaningful. Okay, not sure if there's any other here. Let me see if I can scroll down. I think those are the two questions. Yep. Okay, and we got a hand. Here we go. I like this. I like discussion. Okay. So, Carlos.
Hi, John. How are you?
I'm well, my friend.
Good, good. So going back to idle chatter and aligning now or asking about harsh speech, and I'm kind of connecting that to like mirroring. We talked about in our training mirroring. So I caught myself in what I consider mirroring speech. So somebody's harshly talking about managers keeping everybody in the dark, and it was this surge that just kind of took over, and I started to also engage in harsh speech about my manager keeping me in the dark. So on one level, it was like aligning, understanding, kind of reinforcing kind of a me too, I'm suffering just like you. But at the same time, I also felt like this surge of like wanting some justice here, and the anger was truly kind of building up. So there were some times I was able to catch it and then kind of come back, and the motivation was like just to reinforce that it is a frustrating experience and we're all going through this. But there were some times that I wasn't as mindful, and I got kind of caught in the in the anger, and so it was just an observation more than a question, but I did notice that the first impulse was this mirroring quality of aligning with somebody that can take us deeper into samsara, I would imagine.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. This is the good stuff. It's so easy to say, well, that's harsh speech, or this is motivated by something else. But you're coming to these finer lines where maybe I'm starting to share just to connect and identify with and acknowledge something, and then but also that can become divisive speech. See, they're like that, we're like this, and then I could have ill will, or right. And so parsing that out where there's a point where it's really not very harmful, and then it can be, this is the real work. I mean, you're tapping right into the real stuff right there. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Thanks, John.
Okay, I don't see any other hands at the moment. And I do have another question on chat. Oh, just a comment. That's right. So thank you, Carla. The singular practice focus for the day to be very helpful. This is something that is not to be understated by any means, that we can have so many things to be mindful of. We can have so much going on. But if we can target our intention for the day, target what we're working on, we often call that kind of loading up our GPS for the day. So I have my GPS, my destination, my attention for the day. And then when I go off, this can pull me back, it can redirect. And then I can make some progress because I'm not so diffuse. I'm aware, and speech is so vital, right? Speech is something that is so vital, so interactive, and relates to all these other types of behaviors and activities. That's what I was hoping for, is that as we targeted speech, we can start to notice that impact with our interactions, and notice these afflictions as they arise, and states, as Carlos was talking about. Speech started here, then we go here, and start to identify, what am I saying, and is it helpful? So that singular focus is just really beneficial in so many ways. So I'm glad you found it so. Okay, well, let's just tap into the book a little bit. This will lead into our practice for this next week. Where we're at is in the second noble truth. And the cause of suffering is where it all starts, right? And we covered these mental afflictions, and now we're at contaminated karmas. So these mental afflictions, and out of our mental afflictions, we create karmas. And so let's just start there. Page 46, if you have the book. All pleasure and pain depend on karmas, or former actions that have created predispositions in the mind. Karmas can be divided into virtuous and non-virtuous, according to whether they produce pleasure or pain in the long run. For instance, if the effect of an action is to establish a new human life, then that action is virtuous because its long-term effect is a good transmigration. Conversely, if the effect of an action is to cause your rebirth as a hungry ghost, then that action is non-virtuous because its long-term effect has a bad transmigration. So it's really important to notice some nuance here. For example, they don't talk about, well, that's a sin, and this is good, that's evil, and that's that. They're really saying that the result is what makes something virtuous or non-virtuous. So it's this much more gentler approach. You do that, you'll go to hell. Versus, well, certain the results are going to be painful or harmful or have that result. Therefore, it would be an unwholesome action. And so it's trying to get out of like some judgmental thing versus just, well, it's just the nature of things. And so that's one piece. But here he made a point, for instance, if the effect of an action is to establish a new human life. And so there's a point there as well. The cause for a new human life, so 3 higher rebirths, human is one of them, is ethics. That's the primary cause for a next life as a human, ethics. So it's good to know, what we're going to be working on this week is virtuous activity, and virtuous activity are ethics. And so this is such a, it's like, oh, well, this is what you do. And it makes it so simple. Not easy, but very simple. There's very little about karma simple, except that, there's some pieces. Karmas can be divided into those that etch the general outline of a new lifetime by determining the type of birth as well as the length of life, and those fit end. So that's one. So that's a harder formed karma and has very specific attributes and much more determinative, what type of life, length of life, etc. And then there's these other karmas, more flexible, more fluid, that will fill in the details of that lifetime, such as prosperity, good health, and so on. The former type, so this more determinative, is called a path of action, because that action, virtuous or not, serves as a path or a means to a complete lifetime in either a happy transmigration or a bad transmigration. Okay, so really, really important to know. To be a path of action, a karma must have 4 characteristics. Okay, so these are the 4 to make it a complete karma. Motivating intention. Okay, so the intention, that's 1. I'm clear about why I'm doing this. Correct identification of the person or the object. Proper preparation and successful completion. Sometimes all of these factors occur in the case where, so again, intention, this is what I want to do. I identify what I want to do. I do it well, and I complete it. So all these factors can occur as in the case where you intend to give to a beggar and you actually do so. Sometimes only the motivation is present and you intend to give to a beggar, but you don't actually do so. Or you may get the result unintentionally. If you give some money, or if somebody drops through the hole in your pocket on a sidewalk, beggar picks it up. So you didn't even intend to, but he got it. Actions that do not have all four characteristics could fall into the second category, which fills in the details of lifetime. So much of what we do karmically don't have all four pieces, right? But I could get angry and I want to hurt someone, and I hurt someone, and then I feel pretty good about it. That's a complete karma. It's interesting. A lot of these karmas around anger and things like that, they're easy to complete, but really virtuous karma, we tends to be more effortful. So that's something to bear in mind, which hopefully I'll have time to elaborate on. So there's the karmas where it's complete, all four pieces, and then there's a lot of karmas just happening more unintentionally, not with pure motivation or all of these pieces. So finally, karmas can be divided into those performed by groups, such as charities, and those undertaken individually. The effects of karmas can be experienced in the same lifetime, in the next lifetime, or in a life after that. So we can be doing things here and not even experience it for some lifetimes. And there's group karma. So like right now, we are collectively creating karma together, us right now as this group. There's the karma of our town. There's the karma of the United States. There's the karma of states. So collectively, as we engage in things, we have a collective karmas too. So it gets very complicated at those levels as well. And it continues. Strong virtuous or non-virtuous karmas with a powerful motivation to help or harm can yield their effects during the same life. So, yeah, one point that's being made there is, a lot of what we do in this lifetime, we're not really going to get the results so much. Strong ones, complete ones, and strong motivation that are heavy, we can experience this lifetime. And it's also relative to where we are at in our path. So there's also a point there that as we purify, as we cleanse, as we progress, karma is going to be much more, we're going to notice it more. So, let me just double check here. Okay. So with karma, we have to recognize that how I experience the world, how this body came to be, how I see other people, the type of life where, I have resources or not, physical, illnesses, even all that, karma plays a role in all of that. But not just my karma, the karma of the city, the karma of my family, the karma of the institutions I've belonged to, and so forth. So it gets really interesting on that level. However, there's very personal karma, and this is something we have direct control over. And if we get this, it's just so amazing. And there's a top 10 list. That's what we'll be focusing on this week. But whatever's happening, so that karma's here, and so I have a difficult event, or work situation pops up, whatever that event is, or I hurt myself, or lose a job, whatever those things are that could be difficult. Well, that karma has ripened. And so as we've talked about last week, now I have an opportunity, because I'm creating new karma. So I can respond to difficult situations with wisdom and compassion. And I'm cultivating now these seeds of understanding that this karma's ripened, and my question is, how can I be helpful, or what's beneficial? And now I can bring in right speech or a right activity. And so something that's a difficult event, I can transform, I can use as grist for an opportunity to cultivate a whole different opportunity with how I respond. All too often, it's pretty easy to respond unwholesomely, right? Difficult event, complain, act out, divisive speech, all of that comes very naturally. Except it's not natural. We're just conditioned. So it's conditioned by us. So I don't want to use that naturally. It comes out of habit. So here with mindfulness and our practice, we have an opportunity to be aware of now, what's the future I'm creating? So number one is to be aware of my motivation. And if I'm not aware of my motivation, think about how many things we just do without, just on autopilot, without any real awareness of why I'm doing something. Well, we want to increase our ability to know what we're doing. So that's foundational. Be aware of what I'm doing. And then I can bring in this other question. Why am I doing it? What's my motivation? It's a good degree of mindfulness. Ultimately, the way I like to describe mindfulness is within degrees of mindfulness. This is my own language, not out of the text. That this foundational level is I'm aware of what I'm doing. A greater degree of mindfulness is I'm aware of why I'm doing it. An even greater degree of mindfulness is I'm aware whether it's wholesome or not wholesome. Right? Is it beneficial or not? And a greater degree, at its highest degree, is it true? Is it based in reality? And so am I caught up in these misperceptions of self and the world and all that? Am I reifying these things in ways that aren't how they exist? So ultimately, as we practice, we can develop a greater ability to be more present and aware of why I'm doing what I'm doing. And starting with, is it wholesome or not? Now I'm on a whole different trajectory for transmigration, for, the journey, for the path. And you'll see that ethics is foundational to it all. We also want to combine wisdom with that. So wisdom, understanding the interdependent nature of the experience that we're having, the dependently arising experience. And if I can bring that into mind along with wholesome and unwholesome, I'm combining wisdom, with merit, acting in wholesome ways. Really transformative. But what we don't see all too often is any of that, right? So we're on autopilot a lot, and I get upset, and then it's pretty easy to fall into divisive speech or harsh speech, or get angry and talk about somebody, or say something that's harmful, or do something that's harmful, or just not even be mindful about how many people are affected by something I'm doing, just mindless of something, saying things mindlessly. We can be perpetuating these habits and these conditions. So here is holiness is saying, this is first we also have these afflictive states, right? If I'm stressed or angry, well, I'm more prone to creating these unwholesome karmas. If I'm more balanced and more stable, I have more of a shot at responding in a healthy way. If what am I doing to create the conditions so I can cultivate wholesome karma? Am I waking up in the morning? Am I meditating? Am I saying intention for the day? Am I thinking about loving kindness? Am I bringing to mind, the good qualities of all these beings as opportunities to learn? So what am I doing to shape my experience consciously to help support my opportunity then to interact in this lifetime in ways that are conducive to cultivate this path of awakening, conducive to eliminate suffering, conducive to eliminating the causes of my suffering. And so much of that is really requiring that I'm present. So I'm there to make a choice. I was reading a reflection of, I'm teaching a course in another domain, but his reflection was that he has stress and different things at times. It gets pretty high in fear, and what he'll do is go for a bike ride, and that will help him alleviate some of the stress or fear temporarily. And that's been good for him. But now he's starting to do meditation. He's starting to do some practice, and it's occurred to him in his reflection that the bike ride's only a patch. It potentially, this was his words, I'm curious if I can use my meditation, can work on the underlying causes to my fear and insecurity. And, that's just dead on. Basically, we can be using, when we're not triggered, these opportunities of practices to eliminate the misperceptions that give rise, right, to the attachment, to the anger, to the afflictions, to then creating more karma and get on that cycle. Which means that if I'm more present more often, if I note, and that's why I do check-ins during the week with the singular focus, I'm going to start noticing mental habits and attitudes and ways that I cultivate and create unwholesome activities. And I can start to notice their exaggerated qualities, and I can start to notice that I got all worked up really for no apparent reason, and so often we do. Does anyone remember what you were upset about last Thursday? How many stressors did we have today, earlier? And, unless we're paying attention, they come and they go. And we react, and we keep creating them. So foundationally, the invitation here is to start to understand that the life I have today, I've previously created through my conditioning. And the good news is that if you're here in this Dharma talk, you've done a lot of good. I mean, that's, it's beyond, we can't even measure it. So the rare and precious human rebirth that we have, one that has these 18 specific qualities, one that includes this path of Dharma and access to these teachings and interest in these teachings, and a place that we live where we can practice these teachings. Very few humans have it. And that's not even counting all the other types of beings and animals and everything. And you have it. So you've created an incredible amount of good karma to be here now. So your trajectory here now is incredible. So it's funny when people say, like, yeah, really, they got bad karma, some terrible thing happened. No, you got this life, a lot of good has happened, and anything harmful that's happening is being, cleared away, as long as I don't pick it up and run with it. So it's really amazing, the empowering thing is I'm cultivating this path now for my future. So whatever's happening is an opportunity then for me to, continue cultivating wisdom and merit, clarity and freedom and liberation. Just gonna pause there for a moment and see if anyone has a thought or a question there. It's kind of nice that we can have a talk about the prison of samsara and make it optimistic. Because we're actually right at the doorway of liberation with a rare and precious human rebirth. Okay, looks like we got a hand. Carla, just need to unmute your microphone. You should be good.
All right.
Yes.
I've never seen this presented in this way before. The sentence that says to be a path of action. Is that same concept presented in a different way, in different traditions? I'm shocked. Well, I shouldn't be shocked because it's my karma to see it now, but it's just interesting that I don't feel like I've ever really run across this particular description of karma before.
Mm. Yeah, His Holiness did pick an interesting use of how to describe this path of action. And I cannot speak for other traditions. So, I'm trained in Tibetan tradition.
Yeah.
And,
Oh, okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I am too. But
yeah.
I guess maybe other traditions isn't the right way to put it. But other is there some other way that describes this that you've come across in this tradition?
Yeah. So again, karma is a very complex topic. So I'm trying to think of other ways it's presented. This is, as I read that, I thought, well, that's an interesting use of the language. But he's talking about path of action in terms of path, going somewhere. So I'm more used to complete karma and this more incidental karma, which is what he's phrasing. However, there is, and I'm treading on thin water here because I'm not a geshe and highly trained in this area. So be clear about that. There are, like, karma is pretty malleable, right? Karma that hasn't ripened, we can work with a lot. And even this type of karma. But there is, and I think His Holiness makes reference in this text, or it's either this or, I think it's this text later. Some karma that is pretty hardened, that it's really not going to change. And it's a small percentage, but there is some karma that is pretty set. And that's where all complete four actions have been there, but also heavy, and also, a lot of times have to do with these sort of heinous activities. But the vast amount of karma is very malleable, right? So even the length of life, maybe, it's supposed to live this long, but it's more fluid, the interactions, because we're also interacting with the karmas of groups, of institutions of where we live, and others. And so some of that can really be worked with. It's not, deterministic. But he said there's this little small category, some that's pretty deterministic, this little bit, which I'd have to explore a bit more. But in terms of this, the other way I've just had presented was more of complete karmas, which is where all four categories have to be set, and then that's a complete karma, and that's going to have to do with a much greater conditioning of your life. So that would be the way it would have been presented, and then these more incidental things, right? So we get off even in the bodhisattva vows. You don't fully break a vow unless you have the intent. You have the complete peace. So I'm not sure if that answers your question exactly, but I don't know a different, when they split the karma into two groups, there's probably some technical language there, which I'm not pulling up for you.
Well, I look forward to working with this week. Maybe it'll become clearer.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see about those categories. Because I just think of it as complete and incomplete. But there's got to be, trust me, geshes have they got Yeah, they got a whole text that, this is the way that is very subtle. But it's not my strength, so I have a limited training in that aspect. All right. Looks like I might have another hand here. And I love that we can continue to chat. And looks like, is it Carlos got another thought here? Got to push the right button here. There we go. Okay, Carlos.
John, I know we're running almost out of time, but I mean, karma's no joke, and I'm new to Buddhism, so I'm learning more about karma and the cultivation of karma through virtuous, living a virtuous life. But what I heard today is that, which is new to me, between cause and effect, there's conditioning or conditions that one has to really prepare and be very mindful of. Like if I have a seed and I have the conditions of a fertile soil and good water and good sunshine, well, I'm going to have the effect of maybe something kind of shooting through and blossoming and harvesting. But if I don't set the conditions, for that seed, and just have an intention of wanting to plant it, but without action, I mean, how does karma play into that? I mean, I can understand it. It's like I have a seed, I set the conditions of the soil, I plant the seed, and then I have an effect. But what if I just have the seed and not plant it? Is motivation enough to say, well, I have at least the motivation for it, but I don't have the action yet. So I don't know if you can kind of just speak to that just a bit.
Okay, and I'll just move you out, so I'll wrap up with that. So technically using seed and conditions, causes, conditions, seed, so forth. The way that works within a Buddhist framework is the cause for something is always, the same stuff. So for example, let's just call it the lunchroom with that talk. I might have the seed for anger, but there's no condition for anger to arise. Because I'm in a supportive environment, I'm at home in a nice environment, or I'm in a Dharma teaching, or I'm surrounded by supportive friends, I'm in a retreat. But, so the anger is not going to pop up. There's no, condition to trigger it. The being in an environment, lunchroom, disgruntled employees, well, now we got some conditions, right? Facebook probably could provide that too for some people, conditions. And so the conditions also have a lot to do with the conditions of the environment I'm putting that would trigger either kindness or trigger, the seeds of kindness, the seeds that give rise to anger, the cause. So the cause is going to be mental stuff. Anger is a mental state. And so kindness and so forth, these are seeds in our mind stream. And they're going to get triggered and arise and grow based on these conditions that can trigger them. But you're going a step further and saying, well, I want to be more kind and compassionate, so I'm going to plant this seed. Well, what do I need to do to take care of that? And that's where having a practice that creates a conducive environment for love and kindness and condition, for wisdom to grow, if I'm reflecting mindfully on my activities and interactions and the interdependent nature of things. So what I'm doing consciously is I can be fertilizing those seeds, right, that I would like to grow by putting myself in wholesome activities like a Dharma talk, by making sure that I take good care of my health and well-being, that I'm not too, hostile environments, that I can meditate on loving kindness and really water that seed. And so that's conditioning that I'm providing to help grow and have that more dominate my mind stream and let those roots, fill out. And then the outer conditions that may trigger something as we grow these seeds in different ways, even conditions that once would have triggered anger won't, because we've been either eliminating that through wisdom or dominating our mind streams with other seeds, our conditioning of ways to respond. And so that's why it's so important, take some time in the morning, think about the kindness of others, think about, the rare and precious day that we have. And it's also important to recognize, what am I allowing into my mind stream, right? So am I, allowing, just horrific violence from TV? Am I allowing, a lot of complaining and harsh talk or anger? And, so I need to be aware of what nutrients, right, I'm giving. Think of it as poison food. So are we, as we're pretty mindful about what we eat sometimes, but often we're not so mindful about what we are letting into our mind. So those are all conditions, but they're also karmic imprints. Everything with any movement of the mind is created an imprint. So karma is like that. It's like this tape recording, just boom, 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 boom. So we can interact in ways, though, as Matthew Ricard says, attributes, qualities of the mind come in clusters. So loving kindness and compassion and so forth, they come in clusters. They're not independent, separate. They come in clusters. They affect each other. And so does anger and resentment, pride, all that. They come in clusters. And so being aware of the conditions I'm putting myself in and cultivating, you also get the reciprocal, cause and effect with others a lot of times as well, but also these clusters of attitudes and qualities of the mind that come together, that support each other. And they can become quite strong if we utilize them. All right. Well, so my invitation this week is, so in our practice book, the long practice, and we normally just record the short one, brings to mind, the 10 virtuous and non-virtuous attitudes or actions. And so this week, as we work with karma, the invitation is going to be for you to bring to mind a particular virtuous action, and non-virtuous, kind of the opposite, that we want to be mindful of. So I'm going to leave the choice more to you. I'll put the list there. But as we, speech, we can even continue with that, because you're going to see it's interrelated. But there's 10 non-virtuous actions that are the top 10 list. And if we can avoid those, if we can cultivate the 10 virtuous, that is the core foundational aspect of all spiritual growth and the conditions for at least another human rebirth. So I'm going to include those as the practice when we do the short practice, but it's hard, like as was pointed out, to maintain all 10. Certainly not bad to maintain all 10. And it's good to keep all 10. And that's why it's nice to remind yourself what they are. And but have one as sort of a primary focus, still observing, if I'm focusing on speech, that doesn't mean I get to go harm people, focusing on speech to not be harmful. And the shortcut is always the motivation. Right? What's my motivation? So is it to harm or to be helpful? And so we'll put the top 10 there, but invite you to work with these virtuous and non-virtuous activities, to be mindful of them, to know them well, and to notice, have some check-ins during the day. Have I done anything that's harmful? Have I done something that's helpful? And the key I want to put down here as we engage in this practice is that observation that we're having of something that is unwholesome or non-virtuous, that's going to lead to maybe a poor outcome. Well, that's nothing to beat ourselves up over. That's nothing to be critical of. There is progress in being aware of it. That's actually skillful activity. To note what I'm doing that is not skillful is skillful. So we don't want the mind that's self-critical going, oh, there you are again, oh, there you go. It's much more the Buddha, if we think of the Buddha with us, he's just guiding us. He's our dear friend. And as I observe these unskillful actions, I'm observing it from the mind of aspirations, of qualities, of growth, and going, oh, wow, look at that. That's not working out. So I am successfully transforming an unskillful activity into wisdom. And I don't do that when I beat myself up. Beat myself up at no place in this practice. That's just another grasping. So it's always from a perspective of a guiding dear friend, helping us to observe and become more skillful. So when I observe, an unskillful activity, that's becoming a skillful activity. And so I'm learning, and then I get to purify it, and I'm progressing. So this is the quality of mind we want to bring into our observation of our wholesome and unwholesome activities. Understanding that they're all acted upon out of just confusion. This confusion that's giving rise, this conditioning that's gone on. And they're all opportunities to grow. So that's the mind we want to approach this with. All right, well, let's go ahead and dedicate. We've had such an incredible opportunity to come together in the path of awakening, to water these seeds in ways that are truly meaningful, and let us now dedicate our merited wisdom for the benefit of all sentient beings. May all sentient beings be free of suffering and find their awakening. May we also dedicate the merited wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes to purify our own minds, to help us recognize our Buddha nature, for us to achieve enlightenment for the benefit of all sentient beings. May we also dedicate the merited wisdom accumulated here today and throughout our lifetimes for the long life of all spiritual teachers of all spiritual traditions authentically teaching the path of awakening. May they live long, may their teachings flourish. May we also dedicate especially for the long life of His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. May he live long and his teachings reach many.